In this video, I'm going to show you how we went from a full yard of grass to a full yard of beautiful vegetables. And it's getting warmer outside and it's springtime and there's a lot of greenery growing out there. And so before all the greenery's gone and it gets cold and snowy outside, it's a great time to get you some worms and to get your garden going. And also, if you're going to get the fishing rod out, it's definitely a good time to get some worms, and your chickens will love them too. And so last video we showed y'all our tomato, and that was the clip of the tomato, and we've got an update on our giant tomato later on in the video. So before we get into all of that, here's a look at the before and after. And this is 4 years in the making. This doesn't happen overnight or something that you can just wake up and it be there. It does take a lot of elbow grease, blood, sweat, and tears, but we made it happen, and there's the update on our giant tomato, and hopefully it'll be a world record tomato. And we only have to go, I believe it's 28 feet for a world record organic tomato, so I got high hopes for that one. And if you want to know how we grow world record tomatoes, potentially, it'll be the link down below. You can check out the video on how we plant our tomatoes. But before we jump into how to grow giant tomatoes, let's talk about what you have to get started, or at least you have to in our opinions. And that's going to be a few products and also a worm bin, and most importantly, the good news is if you do want to grow beautiful vegetables and maybe a giant tomato, these products right here will get you there. And we've went through many tests and trials and experiments over the years, and there is no better products than these that I've seen, or in our opinion, that you can even look up on YouTube, because I've seen the gardening videos, and in our opinion, we're a cut above the rest. And so, like I said, this is a sneak peek of the video we did last week, or 2 weeks ago, and this is how we planted our giant tomato, and he's working out beautifully. And the secret is to just bury it deep, and to also heavy water at transplant. But the real secret is going to be in the compost pile, and that's where all life begins and ends. And when we start our compost, we've done a lot of videos on how to set up a worm bin, and there are 2 routes you can go into when you are trying to garden, and that is you can straight up buy the castings or compost, which is going to be your easiest way to do it, but it is going to be your most expensive over the long term, which there's nothing wrong with it. That's how we got started, and that's how we gardened for our first year. But once we got a little bit acclimated to the worms and figured out what they wanted, it was definitely the better choice is to raise your own compost, because you know exactly what's going in it, and you know exactly how much work it took to get there. So when you do get your castings and put it on your tomato, you'll be way more appreciative of it. And there is no free lunch, so if you are one of those people that's like, I'll just get them from the store, you don't know what you're missing out on when you actually grow it yourself and you get to appreciate the plants and the beauty of nature. And that's what we like to do, is we like to grow it not only for the great smells on stuff like basil and mint, but also for the great flavor of stuff like parsley and cilantro, and not to mention the health benefits of eating some fresh lettuce along with some of our fruit trees. Because not only do we have a garden and a worm bin, we also have fruit trees, and it is a food forest out there, and we're working every day to have more trees and have more vegetables, and it just to keep looking better year over year. And you already seen the improvements from year 1 to year 4. and 4 years from now, there's no telling how beautiful it will look. But I got an idea based off my pictures, it's going to get better every year. And that's something to think about when you are first starting and you have just grass. Don't get discouraged at year 1 or 2, because every year that we've gardened, our plants have been better and our soil's been better. And not to mention, our worm bins are still getting better year over year. And something else to consider is going to be the worms, and it also ties into the wheatgrass pads, as worms love the wheatgrass pads. And it all couldn't happen without the worms. And it really couldn't happen without the wheatgrass pads. But with that, here we have about 3 or 4 days growth on some wheatgrass pads, and the ones that are looking decent are just peat moss and wheatgrass seeds, and the one with a little bit of extra growth actually has a little bit of our microbial mix on it, and you'll be able to tell from the roots. And as you can see, the one on the left has microbial mix, the one on the right is just peat moss. So it might not seem like a big difference, but an extra ½ inch of roots taking up nutrients is going to make a lot of difference, especially over time. But just so we're clear, it's not necessary to put our microbial mix on wheatgrass pads. It was just to show the example of the roots, as wheatgrass is one of the faster growing plants and it has a very thick root mass to it. So, but anyway, definitely don't underestimate the power of worm castings, because we gardened for a long time without worms, and it was a struggle every time to get the seeds to germinate right, to getting our transplants to not fail, and not to mention super expensive to buy the bag dirt, and it just wasn't a winning recipe. And not only that, there's a lot of information out there that's not very helpful when you're first starting to get gardening, but we're not going to get into that. So here we have our elixir of life, aka our seed starting mix, and without it nothing will grow, and with it everything grows that we've tried so far. And so what you're going to want to do is mix up some peat moss, some worm castings. Hopefully you got your own compost pile going, or your own worm bin would be even better. And just mix it all up, and then you'll have your seed starting mix. But since we're talking about castings, there is a way to get good dirt without worm castings, and that's with a compost pile. But if you do have a compost pile, you just need to realize that that is a long-term play, where worm castings are a short-term play. And what I mean by that, the compost pile could take up to 3 years before it's ready to be used in the garden. If you have some type of woody debris material or something similar, like let's say you have a whole tree in your compost pile, that could take 3 to 4 years before it turns into basically peat moss, which is what the foundation of our mix is. And so it is a good idea, if you're brand new, to go ahead and start your compost pile, because there is certain things that you don't want in your worm bin, specifically something like a whole cabbage. It would be great for the compost pile, which there is ways to put the cabbage in there, and that would be to just do a blended slurry of the cabbage. But let's say you don't want to do all that, so you put the whole cabbage in your compost pile, and like I said, you're 1 year to 2 years out from finished compost. And so the better way to do it, in our opinion, is with a worm bin. And here we are preparing our gardens back in the fall, and as you can see, it is a bag of microbial mix, and then we water it in, and then you'll be ready to transplant. And this bed grew some amazing lettuce the way we did it right here. And I will tell you that you know, it is going to be super expensive to fill up a raised bed like this with castings, even if you are doing it with your own castings. So a compost pile would be a good way to fill it in. And all right, so I know you're probably a little overwhelmed with all the homework I've gave you, but don't worry, as the good Lord has our backs in this endeavor. And so I'll give you a Bible verse from Isaiah 58:11. The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land and will strengthen your frame. You will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. So whether you're sold on red wigglers for your worm bin, or if you want a compost pile on the cheap way, which is compost, I got a fun fact for you, and that is that either way, regardless of how you do it, the worms are going to be in charge of making that compost. Now, there are other stuff that gets in the compost and breaks it down, but if you go outside and dig up the bottom of your compost pile, there should be some native earthworms there. And so, even there, the worms are basically a worm bin eating the resources that you put there. But why make the worms fight it and struggle to get in there when you could just give them optimal conditions and make the worms' life a little bit easier and better for the both of us? And so hopefully I haven't scared you off from composting or red wigglers, because they both have their way in the garden and they both are something that you need to have. But our preferred way of doing it is going to be with red wigglers in a worm bin, and we take them and feed them food scraps and worm food and the microbial mix and all the other good stuff that they need, like the premium grit. And in a few months, we have some of the blackest dirt you ever seen, and it absolutely sets the garden off in a good way. But don't get it twisted. The worms, when you raise them, you can definitely go to the comments below and ask some other people, is it difficult to raise worms? And they'll tell you it's not. And I've tried a lot of different hobbies and a lot of different ways to stay busy in this life, and nothing quite does it like the worms and gardening. And it's probably the easiest chore I have around the house is going out to the worm bins and feeding and watering them every 3 days. And so it's not like you got to go out there every day and make sure they have water and everything. But you definitely can go out there and check on them every day. But we recommend every 3 days. That way the worms have time to get settled in between feedings and waterings. And then besides that, after 3 to 6 months, you're ready to harvest the castings and put them into the garden. And it's very rewarding to take that nutrient-rich dirt and then to give it on your favorite plant and watch that plant then have a good time growing new green leaves, and then you get to pick the fruit. And here we are, it's the middle of May, and this is our garden, and this is with mostly worm castings and everything on our website put together in the perfect way gets you to this. And so, you know, it is a lot of work, but if you look at this tomato plant, it is a potentially a world record tomato plant. I believe it will get 30 feet tall. And so anyway, that'll be nice to know that if you were on the fence about worms, that no, worm castings are the greatest thing you could ever have in your garden. And they will take any expectations you have to the next level. And definitely don't underestimate the power of growing your own food, because have you ever seen a more beautiful purple cabbage? And it's not even made its cabbage yet, but it looks pretty. And at this point in the video, I'm pretty sure everybody still watching is convinced that worms in gardens are a good thing. And so I'm just going to kind of talk about the garden. And so here we have our lettuce bed, and I've been to some of the fancier grocery stores, and you just aren't going to see lettuce that looks this pretty. And I know for a fact it's not going to taste as good either, because it was cut a week or two ago and now it's in the store. And these lettuces, you just get it when you want it, and you don't have to go to the store. But anyway, we've made a few improvements on the farm. We've got some trellises and some tomato cages, and we got them all tied up and wrapped around our whiskey barrels. And I do believe that's going to be a game changer for us, is to have something a little sturdier than a stick. And those ridiculous little plastic clips, those aren't happening anymore for me. And also, this is after a heavy flooding rain, and it's rained about 7 days in a row. And so definitely don't judge me based on the way my plants look, as it is not stopped. But the tomato seems to not care, but some stuff's blown over and a little wind torn. But so far, everything we've planted is doing great, whether it's squashes, tomatoes, or lettuce. And we do have some corn back there, and I will, full disclosure, it is not 6 feet tall corn, but if you go back and watch my video I did last year, we did have corn that was taller than me, and I'm right at 6 feet. And this one is a purple corn, and it's supposed to be a little special, and it only throws 2 ears. So I don't know if I'm going to grow it again, just because I like to show y'all how good the garden can be. But definitely cut me some slack on my corn this year. But the season's not over. It's really just getting started. And so definitely should get you some worms and a compost pile and some castings, as 3 to 4 months from now will be the perfect time to get your winter garden going. And there is a spring garden season and then a winter garden season. So definitely don't think that gardening is something you do when it feels nice, as some of the best tasting vegetables that we eat grow through the winter time, like cabbage and onions. So definitely, I hope I've inspired you. I hope I've taught y'all a few things, and I hope that your compost and worms and garden do amazing this year. And y'all are absolute legends for still being here and supporting us at harleysworms.com. And with that, thank you, and I'll see you next time.